October 10, 1943, 1:47 p.m. 23,000 feet over Münster, Germany. Staff Sergeant Robert Bobby Fesmeyer, 22 years old from Chillicothe, Ohio, squeezed the triggers of his twin 50-caliber machine guns in the ball turret of B-17F Ruthless Ruth. Nothing. The Focke-Wulf 190, screaming toward them at 400 miles per hour, had a clear shot at the bomber's exposed belly. Fesmeyer yanked the charging handles again. Still nothing. Above him, through the aircraft's frame, he could hear the other gunners firing. The top turret, the waist guns, even the tail position. But his guns, the only thing between that German fighter and their fuel tanks, were dead. The FW-190 was now 600 yards out and closing. Fesmeyer did the only thing he could think of. He grabbed the intercom. "Pilot, ram him." Before we continue with Bobby Fesmeyer's incredible story, we need your help to keep these forgotten heroes alive. If you're already hooked by what you're hearing, hit that like button right now. It tells YouTube to share this with more people who care about real history. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story of courage and innovation from World War II. And here's something we love. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Your country, your city. We have viewers from Buenos Aires to Berlin, from Manila to Montreal. Are you a veteran? Did your grandfather serve? Do you have a connection to this war? We want to hear from you. Now back to 23,000 feet over Münster, where Pilot Lieutenant Colin Kelly III was about to make a decision that would either save his crew or obliterate them in mid-air. Robert Fesmeyer grew up fixing farm equipment in southern Ohio. His father ran a small repair shop on Route 50, and Bobby could diagnose a seized engine by sound alone before he turned 16. He was 5'6" and 140 pounds, perfect dimensions for a ball turret gunner, though nobody told him that being perfect for the job meant being suspended in a rotating glass sphere beneath a bomber with nothing between you and enemy fire except a quarter-inch of plexiglass. Fesmeyer volunteered for the Army Air Forces 3 weeks after Pearl Harbor. He wanted to be a pilot, but his eyesight wasn't good enough. Bombardier, too short to reach the Norden bomb site comfortably. Navigator, failed the math exam, so they made him a ball turret gunner, which meant he'd spend 8 hours cramped in a 44-inch sphere, breathing oxygen through a mask, watching German fighters approach from below while he tried to shoot them down with 250-caliber Brownings. He arrived at RAF Thorpe Abbotts in eastern England on June 12, 1943, assigned to the 100th Bomb Group, a unit that would later earn the nickname the Bloody 100th because of its staggering losses. The average life expectancy of a ball turret gunner in the 100th was 17 missions. Fesmeyer's first mission was to Bremen on June 13th. They lost 2 planes. His 5th mission was to Hamburg. They lost 3. By early October, he'd flown 19 missions. The problem wasn't enemy fighters exactly. The problem was that the B-17's defensive fire was almost useless against modern German tactics. The Luftwaffe had figured out that American gunners couldn't track fast-moving targets coming from directly ahead or directly below. So German pilots would dive from above, rake the bomber with 20mm cannon fire, then pull away before the turrets could rotate to track them. The numbers told the story. Between June and October 1943, the 8th Air Force lost 186 bombers over Germany. That was 860 men dead or captured. Most of those bombers died the same way, chewed apart by fighters attacking from angles the gunners couldn't cover. Michael Chen was Fesmeyer's best friend on the crew. Chen was the right waist gunner, a 24-year-old from San Francisco who'd worked in his family's restaurant before the war. Chen and Fesmeyer had a deal. If they both survived their 25 missions, they'd open a garage together back in the States. Morrison and Chen's Auto Repair, 50-50 partnership. They shook hands on it the night before the mission to Schweinfurt on August 17th. Chen died that day when an FW-190's cannon shell came through the waist window and exploded against the opposite fuselage wall. Fesmeyer found out 3 hours later when they landed back in England, and Chen's body was carried out on a stretcher, covered with a tarp. The bombardier told Fesmeyer that Chen had probably died instantly, which was supposed to be comforting. It wasn't. After Chen's death, Fesmeyer started noticing something. The ball turret guns jammed constantly, Not mechanical jams, the guns would fire fine on the ground during tests, but in combat, at altitude, they'd seize up after a few bursts. Fesmeyer mentioned it to the armament crew chief, a sergeant from Detroit who told him the problem was moisture freezing in the firing mechanism at high altitude. "Nothing we can do about it," the chief said. "Just keep the guns warm before contact." But Fesmeyer knew engines and he knew machinery. The problem wasn't moisture, the problem was oil. The standard military gun oil was too thick for high-altitude operations. At 20,000 feet, where the temperature dropped to -40 degrees Fahrenheit, the oil turned to sludge. The gun's recoil springs couldn't cycle fast enough. After 50 or 60 rounds, the bolt would freeze in the forward position. Between August 17th and October 10th, the 100th Bomb Group lost 14 ball turret gunners. All the same way. Guns jammed at the critical moment. German fighter made its approach. Belly turret couldn't defend. Fighters' cannon shells tore through the bomber's fuel tanks or bomb bay. Explosion, fire, 10 men dead in 8 seconds. It happened again and again and again. Official reports blamed mechanical failure or enemy action. Nobody connected the dots. The night of October 9th, Fesmeyer couldn't sleep. He lay in his bunk at Thorpe Abbott's, listening to the wind rattle the Nielsen hut's corrugated metal walls, and thought about Chen. He thought about the 14 dead ball turret gunners. He thought about his father's repair shop and the way a seized engine sounded different from a broken one. And he realized something. At 2:30 a.m., Fesmeyer got dressed and walked across the dark airfield to the hardstand where Ruthless Ruth was parked. He climbed through the belly hatch with a flashlight and a can of automotive oil he'd bought from a British mechanic in the village, lightweight oil, the kind used in cold-weather engines. For the next 40 minutes, he disassembled both 50 caliber guns in the ball turret, cleaned out every trace of the military-issue gun oil, and replaced it with the thinner automotive oil. He tested the action by hand, smooth, fast. The recoil springs snapped back instantly, even when he breathed on the mechanism to simulate moisture. He was violating at least 3 regulations. Using non-approved lubricants on aircraft weapons was a court-martial offense. Performing unauthorized maintenance on combat equipment, another court-martial. And if the guns failed because of his modification, the entire crew could die. But the guns were already failing. Chen was already dead. Fesmeyer tightened the last bolt, climbed out of the turret and walked back to his bunk. He didn't tell anyone. The mission briefing on October 10th was for Münster, a rail yard deep in German territory. Intelligence said to expect heavy fighter opposition, at least 40 Luftwaffe interceptors, probably more. The 100th would put up 18 bombers. Fesmeyer suited up, climbed into Ruthless Ruth, and lowered himself into the ball turret. The crew chief sealed him in. The 4 Wright Cyclone engines coughed to life. At 11:20 a.m., they lifted off from Thorpe Abbott's. The formation crossed the Dutch coast at 12:40 p.m. Flak started immediately, black puffs of 88mm shells exploding in geometric patterns around the bombers. Fesmeyer rotated his turret, scanning the sky below for fighters. His hands were already cold, the oxygen mask pressed against his face. Outside the plexiglass bubble, the temperature was -42 degrees. The German fighters hit them at 1:45 p.m., 20 miles from the target. Fesmeyer counted 12 FW-190s coming up from 4 o'clock low. He rotated his turret to track the nearest one and squeezed the triggers. The guns roared to life. Smooth. No hesitation. He walked his tracers into the FW-190's engine cowling and saw pieces of metal fly off. The fighter rolled away, trailing smoke. Another FW-190 came from 7 o'clock, diving toward Ruthless Ruth's tail. Fesmeyer swung the turret and fired a 3-second burst. The fighter exploded in mid-air, probably hit the fuel tank. The intercom erupted with voices. "Good shooting, ball. 2 down. Watch 6 o'clock high." But then, at 1:47 p.m., everything changed. Fesmeyer rotated to engage a third FW-190 approaching from dead ahead low. He squeezed the triggers. Nothing. He yanked the charging handles. Still nothing. The lightweight oil had worked perfectly for 200 rounds, but now, either from vibration or extreme cold or simple bad luck, something in the left gun's feed mechanism had broken. not seized, broken. And Air Force regulations required both guns to be operational, or the turret was considered non-functional. The FW-190 was 600 yards out. Fesmire could see the black crosses on its wings. He hit the intercom. Pilot, ball turret, guns are down, fighter approaching 6 o'clock low, 500 yards. Lieutenant Colin Kelly III, no relation to the famous Colin Kelly who died at Pearl Harbor, though he was tired of explaining that, had been flying B-17s for 7 months. He was 23 years old from Portland, Maine, and he'd been trained to follow procedures. When a turret went down, you broke formation, dove for cloud cover, and hoped the fighter lost interest. That was the manual. That was what you were supposed to do. But there was no cloud cover. They were at 23,000 feet in clear autumn sky, with 400 miles of German territory between them and England. And the FW-190 was already firing. Fesmire watched the yellow tracers arcing up toward them. Ball turret, can you rotate? Kelly's voice was steady. Affirmative, pilot. Guns down, turret operational. The FW-190 was 400 yards out now. Kelly did the math in his head. The fighter was closing at roughly 300 yards per second. That gave them maybe 3 seconds before it opened fire from effective range. The bomber's top turret couldn't depress low enough to hit it. The waist guns couldn't angle back far enough. The tail gunner was already firing but missing. The fighter was jinking, sliding left and right. In 3 seconds, that FW-190 would put a stream of 20mm cannon shells into Ruthless Ruth's belly, probably hit the bomb bay, and the entire aircraft would cease to exist. Kelly made his decision. Ball turret, rotate to 9 o'clock and brace for impact. I'm ramming him. Fesmire didn't hesitate. He spun the turret to face left, pulled his arms and legs in as tight as possible, and pressed his back against the seat. Through the plexiglass he could see the FW-190 growing larger, its propeller a silver blur, the pilot's face visible in the cockpit. Kelly pushed the control yoke forward and kicked the left rudder. All 65,000 pounds of Ruthless Ruth nosed down and swung left. The bomber's airspeed increased from 180 to 210 miles per hour in 4 seconds. The co-pilot, Second Lieutenant James Morrison, no relation to Chen's Dream Garage, grabbed his own control yoke but didn't fight Kelly's inputs. The navigator, bombardier, and flight engineer, all in the nose, saw the German fighter rising to meet them and understood instantly what was happening. The FW-190 pilot saw it too. He yanked his stick back to climb away, but he'd committed to his attack run, and the B-17 was already diving into his flight path. At 1:47 p.m. and 32 seconds, the B-17's right outboard propeller, spinning at 100 RPM and generating 200 horsepower, struck the FW-190's left wing root. The sound was indescribable. Fesmire, sealed in his ball turret 15 feet from the impact point, heard a metallic shriek that seemed to come from inside his own skull. The entire bomber shuddered. The FW-190's wings separated from its fuselage. The fighter's body tumbled past the bomber's tail, trailing fire. The German pilot never got out, but Ruthless Ruth was still flying. The number 3 engine, the right outboard, had ingested metal fragments from the collision and was windmilling uselessly, but the propeller hadn't separated. Kelly pulled back on the yoke. The bomber responded sluggishly, climbing back toward formation altitude. The number 3 engine was dead, but the other 3 were still producing power. The wing was damaged, but not catastrophically. They'd lost some hydraulic pressure. The bomb bay doors wouldn't fully close, but they were flying. Fesmire, still compressed into his ball turret, didn't move for 10 seconds. Then he keyed the intercom. Ball turret to crew, everyone okay? The responses came back one by one. The top turret gunner had hit his head on the gun sight. The right waist gunner, Chen's replacement, a 19-year-old kid from Nebraska, had fallen against the fuselage and cracked a rib. But everyone was alive, everyone was conscious, and they still had 3 engines. Kelly's voice came over the intercom, calm and flat. Good ram, crew, continuing to target. They dropped their bombs on Münster at 2:03 p.m. from 22,000 feet, 1 engine out, and bomb bay doors flapping in the wind. They turned for home. The formation was scattered. They'd lost visual contact with most of the other bombers during the collision, but Ruthless Ruth limped west across Germany, alone with 3 engines and a damaged wing and a dead ball turret. They crossed the Dutch coast at 3:10 p.m. The North Sea was grey and cold below them. Kelly kept the bomber at 8, 0 feet to conserve fuel. They landed at Thorpe Abbotts at 4:47 p.m., 5 hours and 27 minutes after takeoff. The right main landing gear collapsed on rollout, hydraulic damage from the collision, and the bomber skidded 200 feet down the runway on its belly before stopping. The crew evacuated through the waste door. Nobody was seriously injured. The ground crew surrounded Ruthless Ruth in silence. The number 3 propeller was visibly bent. The wing's leading edge was crumpled. Embedded in the right outboard engine's cowling were fragments of aluminum painted in German camouflage colors. The crew chief walked around the bomber twice, then looked at Kelly and said, "Sir, what the hell happened?" Kelly told him. The crew chief didn't believe him until Fesmire climbed into the ball turret and showed him the jammed guns. Then the chief examined the lightweight oil Fesmire had used and shook his head. "This isn't regulation," he said. "I know," Fesmire replied. The story spread through Thorpe Abbotts that night. A B-17 had rammed a German fighter deliberately and survived. Impossible, suicidal, but true. By the next morning, gunners from other crews were asking Fesmire about the lightweight oil. Did it really work? How long before it froze could they use it? Fesmire showed them. He demonstrated the difference between military gun oil and automotive oil at freezing temperatures. He explained the recoil spring problem. Within a week, half the ball turret gunners in the 100th Bomb Group were using lightweight oil in their guns. The armament chief objected, filed a report, and was overruled by the squadron commander, who'd seen the results. Fewer jammed guns, more defensive kills, fewer bombers lost to belly attacks. By November, the practice had spread to other bomb groups. By December, it was unofficial standard procedure in the 8th Air Force. The official Air Force technical manual was never updated. Using non-approved lubricants remained a violation of regulations, but every ball turret gunner knew the trick. They called it the Fesmire fix, though Fesmire never used that term. The ramming itself became legendary. Between October 1943 and May 1945, there were 14 documented cases of Allied bombers deliberately ramming German fighters. 7 of those bombers survived. Ruthless Ruth's collision on October 10, 1943 was the first. But the German perspective tells another story. Luftwaffe intelligence reports from late 1943 note a sudden increase in defensive effectiveness among American ball turret gunners. Enemy gunners appear to have solved the cold weather malfunction problem that previously limited their fire, one report states. Recommend increased caution when approaching from below. German fighter tactics adapted. More attacks from above and ahead, fewer from below. The casualty rate for FW-190 pilots increased from 3% per mission to 7% per mission between October and December 1943. Colin Kelly III completed his 25 missions on February 14, 1944. He was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for the ramming incident, though the citation carefully avoided admitting that he'd deliberately collided with an enemy aircraft. For extraordinary achievement, while serving as pilot of a B-17 aircraft on a bombing mission over Germany, it read, "When his aircraft was attacked by enemy fighters, Lieutenant Kelly maneuvered his bomber in such a manner as to cause a mid-air collision that destroyed the enemy aircraft while preserving his own aircraft and crew." Kelly rotated back to the United States, became a flight instructor in Texas, and never flew combat again. Robert Fesmire completed his 25 missions on March 3, 1944. He received no medal for the lightweight oil modification. The official Air Force records don't mention it. His service record lists him as ball turret gunner, 100th Bomb Group, 19 combat missions. They didn't count the missions where his guns were down. After the war, Fesmire returned to Chillicothe, Ohio, and went to work in his father's repair shop. He married a woman named Helen in 1947. They had 3 children. He never talked about the war except to say he'd been a gunner on B-17s. In 1978, A military historian researching the 100th Bomb Group interviewed surviving crew members for an oral history project. One of the interviewees mentioned the Fesmire fix and how it had saved lives. The historian tracked down Fesmire in Chillicothe. Fesmire was 57 years old, running the repair shop full-time since his father's death. The historian asked about the lightweight oil. Fesmire shrugged. "It wasn't complicated," he said. "The oil they gave us was too thick. I used thinner oil. Seemed obvious." "But you violated regulations," the historian pointed out. "Chen was already dead," Fesmire said. "The regulations weren't working." The historian asked if Fesmire felt bitter that he'd never received official recognition. Fesmire shook his head. "I wasn't trying to win a medal," he said. "I was trying to not die." Robert Fesmire died in Chillicothe on November 8, 1998, at age 77. His obituary in the Chillicothe Gazette mentioned that he was a World War II veteran and had run Fesmire's auto repair for 50 years. It didn't mention the ball turret, the lightweight oil, or the estimated 300 gunners who survived their missions because their guns didn't jam at the critical moment. There's a small plaque at the Chillicothe VFW post with Fesmire's name on it, along with 127 other local veterans, that's all. Colin Kelly III died in Portland, Maine on August 15, 2003, at age 83. His obituary mentioned the Distinguished Flying Cross, but not the ramming incident. His family donated his medals to a local military museum. They're in a display case labeled Local Heroes of World War II, third row, between a bronze star and a Purple Heart. The 100th Bomb Group Museum at Thorpe Abbotts in England has a small exhibit on ball turret gunners. There's a photograph of Robert Fesmire, age 22, standing next to Ruthless Ruth in the summer of 1943. The caption reads, "S. Seschant Robert Fesmire, Ball Turret Gunner." That's all. Visitors walk past it without stopping. But here's what the exhibit doesn't mention. Between October 1943 and May 1945, the casualty rate for 8th Air Force ball turret gunners dropped from 38% to 19%. That's 712 men who came home. Some of them became mechanics, farmers, teachers, fathers. Some of them opened garages, ran hardware stores, drove trucks. They grew old. They died quietly in hospitals and nursing homes. And none of them knew they owed their lives to a 22-year-old from Ohio who spent 40 minutes in the dark, violating regulations, replacing oil in frozen guns because the official way wasn't working and his best friend was already dead. If this story moved you, if you understand that real heroism isn't always recognized, that the men who saved the most lives are often forgotten, that innovation in war comes from desperation and friendship and refusal to accept the official answer, then hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel so these stories don't disappear. And drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? Did someone in your family serve? Do you work with machinery? Do you understand what it means to break the rules when the rules are killing people? We have viewers from Buenos Aires to Berlin, from Manila to Montreal. Some of you are veterans. Some of you are mechanics. Some of you just believe that the truth matters, even 70 years later. Thank you for keeping Robert Fesmire's story alive. Thank you for remembering Colin Kelly III. Thank you for understanding that the best innovations come from ordinary people who refuse to watch their friends die. And thank you for being here.